Before sunrise, the valley was almost peaceful. Shadow called. Kaydee answered. Two bald eagles exchanging voices through the cold blue light above Big Bear Lake. Then another sound pushed into the conversation. Ravens. Friends of Big Bear Valley described the August 18th morning as a beautiful chorus, but even they noticed the blackbirds. At one point, the organization joked that Shadow and Kaydee might have been discussing the ravens that seemed to be trying to drown out their calls. On another eagle nest, on another morning, that might be nothing more than background noise. But this is Big Bear, and Big Bear has history with ravens. Very recent history. The kind of history that makes viewers hear those calls differently. Because only months earlier, ravens entered this same famous nest, and by the time they left, 2 eggs were gone. January 30th, 2026. Shadow left the nest before noon. Jackie did not immediately replace him. For reasons nobody could know, the nest remained unattended. Friends of Big Bear Valley later noted that 1 egg already appeared damaged and said there could have been several reasons the adults stayed away, including possible territorial activity elsewhere. Then, ravens arrived. The nonprofit reported that both eggs were breached. CBS Los Angeles later described footage showing a raven pecking into one of the eggs. Jackie returned afterward and continued attempting to incubate a damaged egg, driven by the hormonal cycle that had not yet told her the season had suddenly changed. For viewers, the event was brutal. A nest that had looked safe only hours earlier was empty. 2 eggs that represented a new season were destroyed, and ravens had exploited the opening. That is why hearing ravens around Shadow and Kaydee now can trigger an immediate reaction. They're back, but we need to be precise about what back means. There is no evidence that the ravens vocalizing around Shadow and Kaydee in August were the exact same individual birds that entered the nest in January. There is no evidence that those August ravens were preparing to attack the eagle nest. There were no eggs to steal. There were no tiny eaglets to threaten. August 18th was not January 30th happening again. But the sound still matters because it reminds us what kind of neighbors live in this valley. Ravens are not harmless decorations flying behind the stars of the camera. They are intelligent, opportunistic birds. The National Park Service describes common ravens as remarkably adaptable foragers that will eat an enormous range of foods, including eggs and nestlings when opportunities appear. They observe. They investigate, they exploit openings, and Big Bear viewers have already seen exactly how fast an opening can matter. Think about the January sequence. The eagle nest had 2 adult bald eagles associated with it. Jackie and Shadow were not weak birds. They had defended this territory for years, and still there came a window when neither adult was sitting on the eggs. That was enough. The ravens did not need to defeat Shadow in a fight. They did not need to overpower Jackie. They needed opportunity. That is the real danger. And it is why future nesting between Shadow and Kaydee, if it happens, will depend on far more than affection or pair bonding. It will require coordination. One bird leaves. What does the other do? One parent is distracted. Who stays? Something happens elsewhere in the territory. Does the nest remain protected? Those questions can determine whether a clutch survives. And suddenly the ravens calling over Shadow and Kaydee's August duet become part of a much larger story. Not because they were attacking, because they were there. The valley does not pause while a new eagle learns it. Kaydee may be discovering Big Bear's favorite trees. The nest, the twin pines, the cactus snag, the roost area, the lake. But she is also entering a network of other animals that already know this territory. Songbirds, raptors, ravens, other bald eagles, mammals, predators, competitors. Every established nesting territory is also a place filled with creatures looking for their own opportunities. And Kaydee is young, about 4.5 years old. If she stays, she may eventually have to understand those opportunities from the opposite side. Not as a wandering eagle, as a nesting adult with something vulnerable beneath her. That is a completely different responsibility. Pete Bloom's warning about young eagles becomes relevant here too. He told the Los Angeles Times that inexperienced eagles can make serious mistakes when raising young and tend to improve with age. A mistake around food can be costly. A mistake around an egg can be costly. And a lapse in nest protection can create exactly the kind of opportunity ravens need. But January also taught viewers something else. Loss does not necessarily end a season. After the first 2 eggs were destroyed, Jackie and Shadow began again. Weeks later, Jackie laid another clutch. That second chance eventually changed the emotional shape of the entire year, because Jackie and Shadow did raise young in 2026. Sandy and Luna grew in the Big Bear nest and eventually left the area later in the summer. So the Ravens' January raid became a tragedy, but it did not become the final sentence. Nature rarely gives viewers a clean, straight line. Loss, recovery, success, another loss, a new bird, a new possibility. That is the Big Bear story now, and ravens have appeared at several of its turning points. This is not even the first year ravens have damaged Jackie and Shadow's eggs. The Los Angeles Times reported that ravens destroyed 2 eggs from Jackie in January 2021 as well. Jackie later laid a second clutch that year, although those eggs did not successfully hatch. So when viewers become nervous about ravens, that nervousness did not appear from nowhere. The history is real. But fear can also make us misread ordinary behavior. Ravens vocalizing near eagles do not automatically equal a nest attack. Ravens and bald eagles share landscapes. They interact. They compete. They watch each other. The presence of ravens alone does not predict disaster. That distinction matters. Otherwise, every black wing crossing the camera becomes a villain. And wildlife is more complicated than that. Ravens are doing exactly what ravens evolved to do: survive, search, learn, take opportunities. The same intelligence that makes them fascinating also makes them formidable. National Park Service biologists describe ravens as highly intelligent problem solvers, capable of remembering food locations and learning from their surroundings. They are not evil. They are extremely good at being ravens. And when an unguarded egg becomes food, their success becomes the eagle's loss. That is the tension. One animal's opportunity is another animal's disaster. August 18th gave us a gentler version of that tension. Before the sun rose, Shadow and Kaydee were heard calling through the valley. Friends of Big Bear Valley described it as a lively conversation. And somewhere in that soundscape, ravens became loud enough to be noticed. Shadow called. Kaydee listened. The ravens answered the morning in their own way. No attack followed. No egg was present. Nothing catastrophic happened. But for longtime viewers, the sound carried memory. January 30th, an unattended nest. Dark birds landing. Shells breaking. Jackie returning too late to undo what had happened. It is impossible to hear the August ravens without remembering that. And there is an even more interesting question now. What does Kaydee know, not emotionally, not in a human sense, but behaviorally? How well does she know the raven activity in this territory? Has she learned which calls matter, which birds can be ignored, which approaches demand attention? Where do ravens usually perch? When are they merely passing? When are they watching? Shadow has years in Big Bear. Kaydee has weeks. That difference may eventually matter. An established eagle accumulates a map that viewers cannot see. Not only a physical map of trees and fishing locations, a social map. Who lives where? Which birds are persistent? Which areas produce food? Where threats appear? Where other eagles pass through? Kaydee cannot download that knowledge in a single afternoon. She has to learn it. And one of the most fascinating possibilities is that following Shadow may help her do exactly that. Remember August 19. Shadow flew into the Twin Pines. Kaydee joined him less than a minute later. They remained for hours. Then he left. She followed 2 seconds behind. To human eyes, that can look romantic. To a young eagle learning a territory, it could also be information. Where does the resident male go? Where does he feed? Where does he roost? What does he react to? What does he ignore? That knowledge could be invaluable if Kaydee remains. Perhaps this is why every noisy morning matters. Not because it proves pair bonding, because Kaydee is living inside the territory now, observing, moving, reacting, and learning. If a future nesting season eventually arrives with Shadow and Kaydee as a pair, the ravens will not suddenly appear for the first time. They will already be part of the landscape. That means the real preparation begins long before the first egg, before courtship intensifies, before the nest bowl is ready, before incubation. An eagle has to know the place, and August may be Kaydee's classroom. There is another reason ravens deserve more attention than their size suggests. They do not have to control the territory. They only have to understand it. A raven can spend time watching where other animals move, where food appears, and when a normally defended place becomes temporarily unguarded. National Park Service material describes ravens as highly adaptable opportunistic foragers with remarkable intelligence. That combination is exactly what makes an eagle nest valuable to them at the right moment. Not every raven near a nest is planning a raid. Big Bear's own logs show many raven encounters that ended with nothing dramatic at all. Most of the time, eagles and ravens simply share the landscape. That is what makes the dangerous moments so hard to predict. The problem is not constant war. It is opportunity. January 30th did not begin with a giant alarm flashing over the nest. There was no countdown telling viewers that both eggs were about to be lost. There was simply a gap. That may be the most frightening lesson for any future Shadow and Kaydee nesting attempt. Predation does not always announce itself with a dramatic fight. Sometimes the danger begins when nothing seems to be happening. An adult leaves. The second adult does not arrive. Minutes pass. A raven notices. That is all. And if Kaydee stays in Big Bear, one of the most important things she may have to learn is not how to defeat a raven in combat. It is how to avoid giving ravens the opportunity they are waiting for. That requires timing, awareness, coordination with Shadow, and familiarity with the territory. Think again about the August 18th dawn calls. Shadow and Kaydee were vocalizing while ravens were loud nearby. To us, it sounded like competing voices. To the birds, the soundscape may contain information we can barely interpret. Where is another eagle? Where is a raven? Where did a call come from? What moved below the tree? What changed in the valley before sunrise? For a young eagle learning a new area, those signals may be part of becoming local. Kaydee arrived from the Prado Basin region roughly 70 miles away. The Big Bear habitat is not the place where she hatched. She did not grow up learning every perch and every recurring neighbor around this specific nest. Shadow did. That gives him an invisible advantage. When he looks across the valley from the lookout snag, he is not seeing a postcard. He is operating inside a territory he has used for years. Kaydee is still building that map. And a territory map is more than geography. It is memory. A branch that gives a clear view. A route toward the lake. A roost that feels secure. A tree where another eagle has appeared before. A place where ravens gather. A direction that produces food. The camera cannot show us all of that knowledge. It can only show the choices that result from it. That is why following Shadow could matter for reasons that have nothing to do with romance. Every time Kaydee moves behind him through the habitat, she may gain information simply by being there. Where does the resident male go after dawn? Which perch does he choose? When does he leave the nest? When does he return? What makes him vocalize? What makes him suddenly look upward? What makes him move? Those are lessons no human can teach her. And if she eventually becomes part of a nesting pair, that accumulated knowledge could matter when the nest becomes vulnerable. But there is a second lesson hiding inside the raven story. Shadow will have to learn Kaydee too. A pair cannot coordinate if only one bird understands the other. Shadow has experience with Jackie. Years of it. I knew a partner whose rhythms had been built across multiple nesting seasons. If Kaydee remains, he would be starting again with a younger bird. Her timing would be different. Her reactions would be different. her experience would be different. The ravens do not care about any of that. They only care whether the nest is defended. That creates one of the most compelling future tests for this possible pair. Suppose Kaydee is incubating. Shadow approaches. Does she leave before he settles? Does she wait? Does he arrive with food and distract her? Does she understand when a call from outside matters? Does he understand when she needs relief? Those exchanges can look almost boring when they work. That is the irony. Good nest defense often produces less drama, not more. The adults trade places. The egg stays covered. The ravens remain outside. Nothing happens. Viewers move on. But sometimes nothing happened is the success. January 2026 made that clear because everyone saw what happened when the pattern broke. And Big Bear's longer history makes the warning even stronger. The Los Angeles Times reported that ravens also destroyed 2 of Jackie's eggs in January 2021. That was not the same season, not the same eggs, not necessarily the same individual ravens, but it shows the pressure is not imaginary. The habitat has repeatedly produced the same kind of opportunity. Ravens know nests contain food. Eagles know nests must be defended. The contest can remain invisible for days and then become decisive in minutes. That is why the August 18th calls deserve to stay in our memory. Not as evidence that the ravens were attacking. They were not. Not as evidence that a future clutch is doomed. It is not. But as a reminder that Kaydee is entering a territory with history, a beautiful history, and a dangerous one. She may be learning where Shadow likes to perch. She may be learning the nest. She may be learning the roost. And somewhere around her, ravens are learning too. That does not make them villains. It makes them part of the same living system. The Eagle Cam creates heroes because we watch one nest closely. Nature does not assign the roles that way. The raven is trying to survive. The eagle is trying to survive. If eggs appear, both may see the same object and understand it in completely different ways. To Shadow and Kaydee, an egg would be the future. To a hungry raven, it could be food. That is the collision the cameras may eventually capture. And if it happens, the most important clue may arrive before any raven lands. It may be the way Shadow and Kaydee react to each other. A call, a departure, a fast return, a change in posture. One bird taking over while the other leaves. Small movements, huge consequences. So the raven story is not really about January, and it is not really about August. It is about readiness. If Shadow and Kaydee become a pair, can they turn 2 separate sets of instincts into one dependable routine before the nest contains something they cannot afford to leave exposed? That question will not be answered by one dawn chorus. It will be answered in the quiet spaces between the dramatic moments. There is another uncomfortable truth. Even experienced parents lose eggs. Jackie and Shadow were not beginners in January 2026. Yet ravens still got both eggs. Experience reduces some risks. It does not erase chance. That is why future viewers should be careful about blaming Kaydee if something ever goes wrong. A failed nest does not automatically mean she made a mistake. Weather can destroy a nesting attempt. Predation can happen. Eggs can be inviolable. Food can become scarce. Wildlife success is never controlled by one animal alone, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service notes that young bald eagles face threats from disease, lack of food weather, and human-related hazards. Nature leaves room for failure everywhere. But that uncertainty is exactly why vigilance matters, and ravens are a perfect symbol of it. They are small compared with a bald eagle. They cannot dominate Shadow in the same way a mature rival eagle might. But January proved they do not have to. They need timing, a gap, a nest with no adult, a few minutes. That is enough. So when the ravens interrupted Shadow and Kaydee's dawn calls, nothing terrible happened. The important point is not that danger had arrived. It is that the future will require Shadow and Kaydee, if they become a nesting pair, to live in a place where danger is already normal. The lake is beautiful. The nest view is beautiful. The calls at sunrise are beautiful, but beauty does not make Big Bear safe. This territory contains competition, predators, storms, winter, other eagles, ravens. That is what a successful pair must manage. And perhaps the most revealing future footage will not be a romantic beak touch at all. It may be a raven approaching the nest. Shadow reacting, Kaydee reacting. Both birds showing whether they have learned to operate as a unit. Because a pair bond becomes most meaningful when it has a job to do. Protect territory, protect eggs, raise young, survive. We are not there yet. August is still early. Kaydee is still exploring. Shadow is still moving through his summer habits. But the valley is already giving her lessons. And on August 18th, one of those lessons had black feathers and a loud voice. The ravens may only have been calling, but Big Bear viewers know what ravens are capable of when opportunity appears. So enjoy the next sunrise duet. Listen to Shadow, listen to Kaydee. But if a rough black call cuts through the morning again, pay attention. Not because disaster is coming, because somewhere in those trees is one of the forces that will test whatever Shadow and Kaydee may eventually become. And if there is ever another egg in that nest, the story will not simply be about whether Shadow and Kaydee found each other. It will be about whether they can protect what comes next.